All right, so before we get into the big discussion of the week, we want to do as we do every week, recommend to you podcasts from Osiris Media that we have been enjoying and that we recommend you listen to as well. David, what do you have on tap for us here from Osiris?
One that I recently enjoyed was, of course, the podcast Comes a Time with Mike Finoia and Util Burbridge. They always have very interesting guests. They always get good things out of them. And one of the most recent podcasts, they had Jim Belushi on. So, of course, most people know Jim Belushi as, the brother of John Belushi, long-running comedian, actor, sitcom dad, had a court in the gym forever, kind of a, lovable goofball, Midwestern goofball type, but he's actually been in the news lately more so for having a very large commercial cannabis growing operation in Oregon. I think he has his own podcast about it, and he's kind of become an evangelist for the healing power of cannabis more recently, which is, I think, probably one of the reasons that they wanted to have him on Comes a Time. And it was just a very interesting conversation, kind of hearing how he got into the cannabis game, how it's affected his life, how it's changed the lives of his customers. I think especially he's looking to help the lives of soldiers with some PTSD and kind of really getting down into the nitty gritty of the healing properties of such. But also it's kind of it's a heartfelt convo. I think even at one point when he talks about how like a soldier came up to him and said, one of your strains is kind of the only thing that's helped me get over what I've seen in Iraq. He almost breaks into tears at one point. But, just interesting conversation among a fellow comedian and Mike Finoy, and of course, Util being the incredible bass player, musician that he is. So I think that one was a pleasant surprise. I would highly recommend checking it out.
Yeah, they do amazing work over there at Comes a Time. I love that podcast and the conversations that they get in around both music as well as around kind of lifestyle and positive lifestyle, positive ways to live and exist is just fascinating. I'm going to recommend a episode from the Jambase podcast. Our media partners at Jambase run a phenomenal podcast and hosted by a variety of voices, but this one was hosted by Dave Onigman, who we talked with, I want to say back in April, about the Cluster Flies release, which was an incredible compilation of indie jam artists playing fish tracks from the Farmhouse era. Definitely go back and check that out. We released it, I think, under the Undermine feed. So check that out. Really, really great conversation. Dave is kind of one of my favorite people to hear about and talk about music with. He has a just really cool, like, fan oriented perspective, but also like the questions that he asks within interviews just drive his topics and his interviewees in a really fascinating way. So he spoke with Brad Barr, who is one of the lead songwriters of both The Slip as well as the Barr Brothers, and they spoke mainly about the return of The Slip. The band is coming back. They've played scattered shows. They played like at Lock-In earlier in the year. They played at the Jam Band they played at the Jam Bass 20th anniversary a couple of years ago. But pretty much been radio silence from the Slip since the mid 2000s, as the Barr brothers have been the main focus of Brad and Andrew Barr. They are now back together as the Slip, as a trio. Back when I was first getting into jam bands and was first getting into Fish, the Grateful Dead, I went and saw Vita Blue in the summer of 2002 at the Vic Theater in Chicago, Illinois, one of my favorite places to see music ever. And the opening band was a band called The Slip, and I'd never heard of them, and they blew me away. I bought their record that day. Angels Come on Time was the record that had just come out. Ended up talking with Brad Barr after the show, and he just seemed like a really cool, really genuine, thoughtful guy. And I followed them from there on out. Some of my best friends I made at college were all based around listening to Angels Come on Time, and from the get go, Live at Lupo's, the Alive Electric, Alive Acoustic albums that came out. My wife and I, when we first started dating, one of the things that just like made us absolutely connect with each other was our love for the Slip. The album Eisenhower came out in 2006 and was just like a huge, huge record for me at the time. I was 21 years old. Like I said, me and all my friends in college were listening to these records on just repeat. And then they just went away. And now they're back. And it was a really cool conversation to hear where Brad's mind is as he's restarting this project that, you know, really got him to into the music industry and got him to a place where he could play music professionally for the rest of his life and his entire career. It could be his job. They talk about the jazz scenes that had emerged in Boston and New York that kind of fused with the jam band world in the mid to late 1990s, playing festivals, writing songs, kind of the development and the evolution of the Slip, where certain Slip songs that were written in like 05, 06, 07, how those became Bar Brothers songs, and which of those may come back into the Slips lineup. And he said something that I'm going to paraphrase that I just absolutely loved. It kind of relates to ways that kind of Trey Anastasio talks about music. That when you walk on stage, grace is always present, but it's whether or not I pass through it and whether or not I embrace it. And this idea that like when you walk on stage to play music, there's always that energy that is capable of being reached. It's whether or not you can, as the individual, can surrender to it or can embrace it. And I absolutely loved that. It really just fits the music that Brad Barr has played throughout his career. So, Jam Bass podcast, The Slips, Brad Barr. Highly recommend it, as well as Comes a Time with Jim Belushi.